Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this afternoon's webinar. Will lawyers in the future be replaced by some sort of artificial intelligence or robots maybe? And if not, what aspects of legal services will be assisted by legal tech? I'm very happy to have two renowned experts with me today. Those are Professor Leo Staub. He's professor at the University of St. Gallen and he is director at the Executive School. And Gerard Neiditsch, he is legal strategist also at the Executive School. My name is Friederike Rieder. I'll reintroduce Gerard Neiditsch, who is legal strategist at the Executive School, and Professor Leo Staub, he is director at our Executive School. I'm very happy you stayed with us, and the floor is yours.
So we just experienced what technology can do to you. And thank you very much for your patience, and I apologize, of course, also. So what is legal tech? Do we have to prepare for legal tech? Is it a wave worth surfing? And do we have to invest money in it in order to be modern, to be progressive, to be successful in the future? Before we start, and before we have Gerard introducing us to legal tech and all the questions I've mentioned, I'd like to come up with a threefold piece of advice. Take it from a practitioner, a lawyer. The three pieces of advice are: number one, before you even think about technology, think about your strategy and ask yourself 4 questions. First, what are the services I want to provide? Second, to whom do I want to provide my services? Third, in what territory I want to be active in? And fourth, how do I want to distribute my services to the market, to my clients? So it's about strategy. If you have answers to these questions, you have your strategy. Congratulations. Step 2. Design your processes, your service provision process and your support processes according to the strategy you have defined. So the processes should mirror your strategy. Thirdly, only then and only now start thinking about technology. Technology supporting your processes. That's the goal. So if you do not do it in this order, you might get in deep trouble. But let's hear now from Gerard what legal tech is. Gerard.
Yeah, thank you very much. Before we do that, we'll challenge our technology a little bit more, and we do a short poll to find out who we are, like how many people from different parts of the legal sector are there. So we've got a couple of questions for you, 2 questions, and if you could just rank them quickly, and I'll read you back who is from what part of the market. Because it makes a big difference, as you will see in a moment. Certain technologies are not really relevant if you are in one sector or another, and vice versa. It goes very quickly here. We've got about half of the group outside the legal sector so far. Now it's coming down to a third. And we've got split between in-house and law firms about equal on there. Elsewhere in the legal sector, we've got another 10th, so fantastic. Think we can go on now to the second question. Let me see if I can see who is in there. Well, we've got only 2 people who doubt that legal tech is in fact real, so that's fantastic. Everyone else is saying either it's already here, not quite sure, or more than half of you think it is real and it will become dominant. So, needless to say that I agree with you. So it's great, but now we want to see why there is such a wide diversity, and I understand that, I think, as well. So let's move to the presentation, and I'll just bring up the slides now. Okay. And there we go. So why is it important? Why is digitization, or in the case of the legal industry, I think you can say legal tech encapsulates digitization for the legal industry. Why is digitalization important at all? And you probably know the answer better than me, but what we are seeing now is that in the last 10 years in particular, we've seen that disintermediation, so a lot of intermediaries in a lot of different industries have disappeared, but they have not disappeared without a trace, because all of a sudden we've got new platforms. So all of a sudden, between my clients and myself, if I'm a law firm or if I'm a in-house legal team, are potentially a new platform coming in. And what is important is digital platforms. They are often without lawyers in the case of legal. They haven't appeared yet, but say if you're in Airbnb, it will be a platform where the hotels are owned by someone else. The platform itself doesn't own the clients or the hotels. So they are not material. And if that happens, and when that happens, it's a mega trend. So I think it will happen in all industries to one degree or another. When that happens, we have to be ready. Hence, we need to come to grips with legal technology as one of the instruments to address our position in the market. Otherwise, we risk either disappearing or becoming much less important. So now, several of you have already asked to please define legal tech. That's not so easy because everyone uses a different method. We use one which is pretty straightforward. We divide legal tech in a stack of 3. At the lowest level are common technologies. These are enabling technologies which we see throughout the market. Building on top of that are legal specific technologies that really are there to allow law firms and in-house legal teams, also outside those two sectors, to build legal specific support functions. Those support functions are the normal ones: finance, HR, marketing, etc. There are technology solutions and they're specific to the law because the legal teams or the law firms are not the same as commercial operations. A lot of similarity, but not the same. And building on top of that middle layer are substantive law solutions. And some people define legal tech as being just that. I do not do that because a lot of the innovation is happening particularly at the lowest level, but also at the middle level. And legal tech is a stack of 3 solutions. Now, having said that, what does it look like? Let's start at enabling technologies. These are the things that we are most familiar with in our daily lives. So we are all using those enabling technologies. We're using messaging systems for probably 20 years. We've been using emails, some even longer. Not very exciting, but we need it and we have it every day. But there are new ones coming as well. For example, workflow solutions, or some people call this business process management, apply to legal. Very interesting. In that whole category is also blockchain. That's in the same cluster. But then you also see some things like real-time communications. And in fact, tonight, for better or worse, we're all part of that real-time community. So that means we can do things that we have never been able to do. We can work as virtual teams spread all around the globe, working together on a particular problem, solution, etc.
Gerard, may I ask a question?
Sure.
You are just now talking about real-time collaboration tools. These are, of course, extremely useful when people out of different offices, for example, work together, or when lawyers collaborate with their clients, when drafting a contract, for example. But how about confidentiality and security of these tools?
That's a really good question. So again, there are different grades of tools, if you like. Like we all know from our private lives, we use things, say, for example, Facebook. It's also a collaboration tool. I definitely wouldn't use the consumer Facebook for a business transaction because that information we now know is not safe. But then again, there are tools and implementations that are much safer. And I think if I'm a law firm or from an in-house legal team, I would look at it very careful. Security is a big, big challenge. And I think will continue to be that for moving forward. But the opportunity is so great that we will make it work for us and already make it work now. So every big company now has got a couple of those platforms, whether it's Teams for Microsoft or what we are using now, Zoom or Slack. These are all collaboration tools that make the life of lawyers infinitely easier. So yes, but very, very difficult, very challenging, but fun.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now moving to this middle layer, support process solutions. It's the one I have the greatest difficulty with because it's a traditional environment. The players that are in this layer of solutions for finance, HR, marketing, document management, they are traditional players who's been around for 30 years, but it's central to the operation of both a law firm and at least a couple of those clusters also to in-house legal. Let's start with practice management systems. Practice management systems, they used to be called financial management systems in the old days. In the particular category of law firms, they're called practice management systems. In-house, people use a newer acronym called ELM, Enterprise Legal Management Systems. Both of those go back 30 years and they cater for the very specifics of law firms. But more recently, they've got small add-ons to them that are sometimes no longer small. For example, for law firms, very important and one of the areas most exciting at the moment is the ability to price matters. Why is that important? Today, more and more in-house lawyers are telling their law firms, we want fixed price or we want an alternative way of getting the cost of a matter to a way we can control it much better, higher transparency. And law firms need to find technology to be able to reliably project and price their matters. Really important. Each of those clusters has been around for a while. Often there are only 2 or 3 players left in there. And it's important to choose the right technology to support your strategy. If you get it wrong here, it's very easy to happen. You might get an ill-fitting suit. And that's we want to avoid.
Most of us, even small law firms and small in-house legal departments, use ERP systems. ERP standing for Enterprise Resource Planning Systems. So that's what we know. Think of ERA Micro or Dativ in Germany or when you're in Switzerland. How do the practice management systems you mentioned, how do they distinguish from these ERP systems?
It's a really good question. So people use those terms quite fluidly. I would call those systems that you've mentioned practice management systems, so they're that in their own right. But an ERP system, which is a much larger thing, so an enterprise resource planning system, commonly is referred to something outside legal that includes warehouse production, etc., which we don't have in legal.
No.
If we had all of these things, then it would make sense to have an ERP. ERPs have another advantage. They regularly include the client relationship part, for example, and also HR. So you can get more function from one source. But the problem is they are often very bulky, very big, and very hard to manage. And in a law firm, that would be quite difficult to implement. So we haven't seen that happen really. It happens, we got more specialized software, often from more specialized vendors, not the general purpose big ones, very powerful systems like SAP, which is the most widely known ERP.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so you've got this layer of technology where the choices for you as technologists a bit limited, but without that layer, it's hard to imagine that an in-house legal team, for example, can get a way to control their costs. So ELMs, in the instance of in-house lawyers, they have very sophisticated e-billing functionality, and that's a must. Okay, now where the fun begins really for legal technology is up here. This is where many of the startups live, in this layer of substantive law solutions, and there are many thousands, or a couple of thousand of them around now that operate. What I want to draw your attention to is there are 2 large clusters in here. that are relevant particularly to the Anglo-Saxon space. One of them is e-discovery, which is used in litigation, large-scale litigation. And the other part is due diligence, which is also relevant to us in Europe. But certainly e-discovery is only relevant in the Anglo-Saxon jurisdiction. So you don't really see it unless you're active in the Anglo-Saxon world. E-discovery and due diligence soak up at least 70% of the market in terms of investment that goes into legal technology, just those two areas. And the reason for that is that in litigation, in those large-scale litigation, there are often many millions, sometimes billions at stake, and there people are prepared to spend big money and innovate hard. So to run, for example, one of the larger scale litigations today is impossible to do that without very sophisticated technology. So if you're in that category, no doubt you have already faced that issue. However, there are some other parts of that substantive law solution cloud, and one of them is, for example, the contract management lifecycle management, where people have started to very systematically manage large portfolios of contracts so that they don't accidentally miss a deadline. The other part is document assembly and automation. This is a very old category, but that's really had a renaissance in the last few years, and a lot of in-house and law firm customers have started to invest again very heavily in that. It's been very beneficial.
So document automation seems to be something that's very popular in the discussion lawyers have and in-house legals have when they talk about legal tech. Would you be able to explain in a little bit more detail what document automation can do and how it functions?
Yeah, sure. So document automation has been around for 30 plus years, started in Harvard as far as I know, in the late 80s, early 90s. The idea was to take typical documents that are used repeatedly and don't change much in the way they're used, to take them, disassemble them, put the logic in a decision tree, and use the variables like the parties, the terms, etc., and store them separately, and reuse those templates again and again, and in that way to make significant productivity gains, both in-house and in law firms, and often between the two and with third parties.
Okay. Thanks.
Sure. So now you have seen we've got these three levels, and there's a natural order on how you can go about implementing legal technology. Start somewhere small and then build up from that in those stacks, depending on where you're at. What I want to now quickly discuss with you is means to filter the noise, because there is a lot of noise in the market. And one of them is to think about which sectors are you actually active in. And here we've shown you a map of 8 different sectors that you can have a look at. Most companies or most law firms are only active in a couple of those, and any of the technologies that are not of use to that are really not of importance. I want to give you an example. More than half of all legal tech startups deal with consumer type legal issues. For example, where you can hand over your claim against an airline if the flight has been late, flight delays. That is a consumer issue. Is it important to me as a law firm? No, absolutely not, so don't need to listen to it. Equally, if you have got technologies that are there to get legal aid, that's an access to justice technology. There's some fantastic technology there, because those people cannot afford often to access legal services. But is it relevant to me as an in-house counsel? No. So you don't need to worry about that. And perhaps the next one that is important beside the segment is which jurisdictions you're active in. And that's really important for technology, because it both tells you what you don't need to worry about, for example, e-discovery, unless you're in the Anglo-Saxon space, but also it tells you what you cannot do at the moment, but what you need to keep an eye on. So for example, in Switzerland, to use cloud technology is highly desirable, because a lot of the innovation, if not all of it, is now happening on cloud technology. This is technology that is not run in your own data center, and not in a data center run by somebody else, but in fact it's distributed by a separate provider, you don't need to worry about it. But that is currently, if you use it in one particular way, not really easily done in Switzerland. You need to know about those legal issues, but then you can choose these technologies. So all of these things help you to narrow down what you can do to translate your strategy, as Leo said at the beginning. Also, you're not alone. It's important to know that over the last few years, there have been very strong organizations have sprung up all around the world, and in Switzerland, and in Europe, in the UK, where peers can meet up. I name a few because these are the prominent ones. For in-house legal, they often meet in two groups. One of them is CLOC. These are people interested in legal technology to manage the function of in-house counsel. The other one is ACC, also very successful. CLOC has got a local Swiss chapter. You can find all the information here. ACC has got a global chapter. Peer sponsors for law firms, SLTA for the Swiss Legal Tech Association, ILTA is the global one, P3 is one that deals with pricing, a very interesting group. And then there's many legal tech blogs and podcasts, and we'll be very happy to send those to you. If you want to point your phone there or you write to us afterwards, that will give you the link where you can request those. So having said that, I now hand over to you, Leo, to conclude with a few thoughts.
Okay, I gladly do so. Before we come to an end and before we open up the discussion to you, I'd like to come up with another 3 pieces of advice. First, make sure you have a mutual understanding of the service provision processes within your firm or within your legal department. It's crucial. Do standardize whatever possible, okay? Do not leave too much variety. The more variety you have, the more complex your project gets. Second, you might be scared a little bit now, but do not stand aside when it comes to introducing technology and legal tech tools into your firm or into your legal department. But, and this is a big fat but, go small steps. And even more important, go step by step. Do not exaggerate. Do not be overexcited. Do not overload your colleagues with your projects. And also, strive for quick wins. If you manage to realize one of these quick wins, you'll be the hero in your firm or in your department. Thirdly, and lastly, do not underestimate the challenges of implementing legal tech or technologies in general to your organization. It will take a lot of time, it will take a lot of enthusiasm, it will take a lot of money to get where you want to be. Also, you will have your ups and downs. In the downs, you'll be frustrated and your colleagues will be frustrated. So you have to work on the resilience within your organization. And you have to balance the needs of your colleagues working on mandates for your clients on the one hand and working on the project on the other hand. So it helps, that's my last point, it helps to be transparent and to communicate carefully. So that's it.
Yes.
Do we want to go on to the question?
Well,
Friederike.
thank you, Leo and Gerard. Thank you, Gerard. I will now stop the screen sharing so you can actually now see us again and hear us. Thanks again for staying with us. We have also found what went wrong, so it won't happen again. A few questions have come in already. Please remember you can send us your questions by using the Q&A or F&A field. So the first one concerning collaboration. Are there any tools which can be used by lawyers having to obey, e.g. the GDPR? Teams and Slack isn't appropriate, at least as far as I know, or the person who asked.
Yes, that is. There are technologies. Again, it depends on what your security requirements are. So if you've got high GDPR requirements for some of the work you're doing, I recommend you look at things like HiQ. That's a specific application that is in use in many in-house legal teams and many law firms. It's a portal, and there you can confine where the data is stored and what is exchanged. There are similar tools that are available now. This is changing very quickly. Even in the general purpose tools, you can direct increasingly the big vendors where the data is held and what data is held. So it is changing. Even the ones you've just mentioned, they are changing their approach because they're realizing that it's not just an issue for lawyers anymore. It's an issue more generally under GDPR and other legislation, privacy legislation in the world.
Gerard, are there any liability issues regarding the legal tech?
Yeah, in any technology, that's when you get to liability, you're already in trouble, is my view. It's very rare. I've worked over 30 years in legal tech, mainly in large law firms, and I've only had to take recourse once to a liability issue, and that was in the early 90s. But it requires careful thought on how you build a system, what you take on, what your liability you accept. Sometimes you have to accept some risk, but do it with your eyes wide open because it's like any other risk in your enterprise.
But in general, that's clear. I mean, you're, as a lawyer, you're not only responsible for the content of your advice, you're of course also responsible for the technology you use in giving your advice.
Thank you. And to what extent does legal tech affect or change B2B contract negotiations?
Very substantially. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the negotiations are done online now, and there are specific platforms that deal with online negotiations of deals. It needs to happen, particularly if you've got a field where you've got many time zones, many people around the globe participating in a negotiation. And in those instances, technology is really the only answer. You sometimes cannot physically fly people around fast enough to get a deal closed. So you need technology, sometimes very basic technology, but more often than not, you have a deal room with high participation, collaboration, and there are questions of liability that come into that. If you reveal a fact that is not to be seen by one party and is seen by one party, you've got the same issue as in the physical world, except it can happen quickly. So you need to have very qualified people. They're often not lawyers who participate in that process. And there are whole new categories of jobs appearing, which comes a little bit back to your point at the beginning, Friederike. Are lawyers going to be replaced by robots?
Nobody heard it.
Good. Now you hear it. The answer is probably not, but a lot of lawyers will need to add skills in how to use technology, and new jobs and new job titles, new qualifications are coming up now. And you see at universities that training has started. We ourselves also train lawyers in completely new areas where you need skills, and that will be the same with project management, legal project management, strategy, etc.
Regarding the practical advice, in which instances would you recommend a bottom-up or a top-down approach in departments? Should single departments start with standardized software without waiting for the IT department, or does it have to be an overall organizational strategy everyone has to follow?
In my experience, it's a lot easier to strive for a solution that is placed within the legal department itself. When it comes to specific solutions, okay? We are not talking here about, word processing or messaging systems, but yes, when it comes to specific solutions, yes. And that's a smaller step, of course, and you do not have to coordinate with so many people. So, yes, a lot easier.
I absolutely agree. It's a fantastic question, incidentally, because it's a live question that comes up in any in-house legal team. The challenges now is you need to have very active discussions with your IT departments because you're running into boundary issues. So say, for example, procurement and e-billing need to work together very closely because they might use different systems for general procurement. It's most likely because legal procurement is not the same as procuring office furniture. But you need to integrate at the end of the day to be able to show management how you work. So this is really a dialogue question. Yeah. And as we evolve, we are getting much, much better talking to each other. To be just an island probably doesn't work, but as Leo said, many of the applications are so specific to legal that you can't wait for the rest of the firm to do something. You really need to go ahead and do it.
Thank you. It's a question going in the same direction. Should law firms set up independent units to provide them with technology and legal tech services, and which are managed like other companies, unlike law firms, are managed?
That's a difficult question. I guess most of the law firms in our area, let's talk about the German-speaking area, are not big enough to write their own software, okay? So what usually they do is they use legal tech as a service providers. So that's probably the way to do it.
Thank you. Do you have anything to add?
Maybe to add to it, we're seeing in very large corporates in Switzerland, the largest in-house legal teams are several times the size of the largest law firms. In those clients, we see dedicated teams, not just for legal tech, but for process management, which goes hand in hand, the point that Leo made, that the process needs to map onto the strategy. You need people who understand that, who can actually help with that. These are, to use a term that you may have heard, Six Sigma people who are really specialized at project management and delivering services to the clients, to the in-house legal teams' clients. We are seeing those. There are several in-house legal teams in Switzerland that are large enough to do that. Equally in Germany, they often sit with multinationals.
Right. May I add something to this question? It's actually a very important question. What we usually advise our clients to do, be it in-house legal departments or law firms who want to, go deeper into this field of technology, we advise them to assign the task of evaluating opportunities to use legal tech devices to a person or to a small team. And that usually the best person for this is usually not the most senior partner or the boss of your in-house legal department. Sorry for that, but it's really not. But if maybe you have a small team of young people dedicated to dive deeper into this, and they can be of very great value for your firm and prepare the decisions finally you have to take as a partner or as a general counsel.
And now really few people want to know who are really the market leaders in legal tech globally or in this area.
As you gathered during the presentation, it's not one area, it's a whole stack of different players. But I think maybe you wanted to ask who are going to be the platform players. And if that is the question, it's one thing that we're all grappling with at the moment. We're seeing early signs. I say it's very early signs in some segments that there are platform players appearing. If you want names, it's a bit difficult, but I can mention two. UNIted and Elevate are two companies that are getting a lot of momentum. You're seeing Intap as an integration player, a very unusual company. You might want to have a look at that. And amongst the very big ones, the old guard and now also newer guard, because they've invested a lot over the last times, are Thomson Reuters and the other big publishers, the three big publishers. They're all invested heavily in technology. Their challenge is how are they going to integrate all the purchases they've made over the last few years. Some of them have over 30 or 40 different technologies that they are trying to integrate. Right. In the in-house legal space, we're seeing new players come in for the first time in a very long time. And there's, for example, one company that's called Onit, that is growing much faster than any of the other players. They're growing at 200 or 300% a year at the moment, so quite interesting, and they're not small anymore. So there's a lot happening. It's a lot of fun to watch and see, but it's a bit early to say whether there will be a dominant force. Also, the big four are starting to play very heavily in the space, and their legal sections, both as law firms and as legal tech and other legal providers, are growing rapidly.
Right.
Thank you. Well, we started a tiny bit late because of the problem, so I think we can take 2 more questions. Where was it? Do you have a source for ex-US legal tech companies? Oftentimes the US tech vendors are overly complicated and not optimally suited for EU jurisdictions.
It's a good suggestion. I have a very long list. I've got hundreds of companies on my list, but I have never sorted them by that particular way of looking at it. But it's fascinating to see that Scandinavia is doing a lot. The Netherlands is doing a lot. There's some startups and interesting companies in Germany. There's a couple in Switzerland. And so you see quite a lot of diversity. And the difficulty I think that we all have is how can we sift from the really interesting ones from the ones that may not be around very long. I could talk for a very long time on that, but it's better covered by watching practitioners and asking them what they have picked. We're, for example, in the process of doing something like that. In the next few months, we will have a series of talks where people who have made these decisions, like the ones you're grappling with, and they can explain why they've made the decision, and they're not from the vendor side, who are very knowledgeable people as well, but they're in fact people who are using technologies, and they will explain why they picked them. Some of those people, all of them, will be incredibly fascinating to do that. We'll send you some information after this event.
Maybe a very general last question. Are there tools which enable an exchange of knowledge between lawyers? Do you know of any?
Lawyers outside, perhaps it's difficult to say if the question is lawyers outside the organization, or is it amongst, say, for example, in-house legal counsel. Then each of those organizations that I've shown, they have their own platforms to exchange knowledge, and they do that. I know ILTA, I've been a long-term member there, and I don't know how many dozens and hundreds of questions have fired off and had discussions with inside that team. And I know that CLOC and ACC for in-house counsel are extremely active. Highly recommend using their collaboration platforms, which are closed groups, to exchange that knowledge.
Well,
Okay. May I add something here?
Please do.
Gerard just mentioned a series of talks starting this fall on legal tech matters, and you might want to look into that. It's called Fit for Legal Tech, and you'll find it on our website.
well, thank you very much. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your patience with our technical problems and for your questions. There's some we didn't have time to answer, but of course you can reach out to these 2 experts. And if you found this interesting, there are more webinars coming up this week on the topic of digitalization, on leadership and the technology behind. So check those out if you would like to. And I wish you a nice evening. Do you have any last words?
Well, thank you. Hope
Thanks
to
very
see
much.
you soon in Fit for Legal Tech. Bye.
Well, thank you.